Welcome, I'm Grazia Santangelo. I'm one of the co-editor of Global Strategy Journal, and I have the pleasure to share this virtual information session about the special issue on global innovation in era of disruptive changes. Let me share my screen so that I can also introduce the guest editor and give you a bit of more additional information about the special issue. We have an amazing lineup of guest editors, all of whom are present today at this virtual meeting, and the submission deadline is September 30, 2025. We are holding, in addition to this information session, a number of paper development workshop and panel at other So there will be other occasion for you or other colleague to engage with the guest editor team. But without any further ado, let me introduce the guest editor. We have Peter Buckley, Mario Kafouros, Marianna Marra, Srividya Jandhyala, Minyuan Zhao, and Shasha Zhao. All of them are here today, and each of them has a specific take on the special issue call. Just on my side, as a co-editor of the journal, I would like to make a point about the type of article that Global Strategy Journal is interested in. The journal is publish research on global strategy, which is basically we are interested at the intersection between the global context and company strategy. So we are interested in how company react to global strategy, to the context, changes in the context of the diversity of context. And typically, in terms of empirical paper, multi-country data set are the one that best suit the mission of the journal, but also the journal welcome paper that are focused on a single country as far as they study, examine the decision of company to cross the country border or the comparison between domestic and foreign company. So this is just prerequisite of all the paper, not just the one that will be submitted to this special issue that needs to for the paper to be able to pass this first screening process and to fall within the Global Strategy Journal domain. A few information about how we're going to organize the time together. I will ask each of the guest editor to offer an opening statement that is about their take on the special issue call. And then based on this statement, you will have an opportunity to join one of the breakout rooms that will be led by the different co-editor. So the idea is that in this breakout room, there is an opportunity for a more targeted Q&A session about the specific idea you might have about paper to submit to the special issue. And we will leave a question, a more general question regarding the special issue for the last part of the session where we will be getting plenary all together. So I just stop sharing my screen now. And give the floor to the guest editor team in alphabetical order, so you know who comes after, starting with Peter. Peter, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Grazia. And my particular issue here and my particular take on this is to look at the geopolitical tensions and the effect of disruptive technology in an era of disruptive changes. Now, when we started this, we were of the opinion that the world economy was going through a disruptive era. Little did we know quite how disruptive that would be. So what I did before when I talked about this, I looked at the Donald Rumsfeld classification of known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. as a way of trying to look at the separate issues that are involved. So we do know that there is a massive fracture in the world economy between what might loosely be called China camp and a US camp. We now have a massive fracture within the US camp. What was previously called the West can no longer be considered to be a single unified bloc because of the tensions, for instance, between US, Canada, Mexico, EU, etc. So this makes the life extremely interesting because where is techno-nationalism now? Is it between blocks or is it within a bloc? And how does this increasing fracture and these increasing difficulties in the world economy brought about by tariffs, by the unpredictability of policies, particularly following Trump, how does this affect this innovation? Is innovation likely to be stimulated by this, or is innovation likely to be inhibited by this? Put more accurately, in which areas is innovation likely to be stimulated? You might argue that innovation in defense might become more important. Is it likely to be inhibited because of the growth of VUCA? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And we have all of those in spades, growing very rapidly and inhibiting trade, investment, and all other kinds of exchanges across the global economy. So how is this likely to affect things? Is it likely to affect big firms more than small firms? Is it likely to affect innovative firms more than less innovative firms, and so on? Then we have the disruption from technology itself. Which jobs are safe? Which innovations create jobs or reduce jobs? Which are the areas where there is more scope for collaboration internationally? And which area is likely to improve inventiveness? So will this increase in VUCA increase or decrease global innovation, and in which areas? So all of that is relatively predictable. We have some known unknowns. When we take VUCA, volatility and uncertainty, to the level that companies are facing, how does this affect global transferability of innovation? And does it affect it differentially within a firm or between firms? So we've got lots and lots of unanswered questions. And one of the really interesting issues is how do our theoretical perceptions face up to this? What can we have a theory that can really help us to answer these absolutely vital questions about how global innovation will occur in an era of increasingly disruptive change? So what kind of theories are we going to use? Is this a test of the viability of theories? And how does this affect theories of innovation, theories of international business, theories of the multinational firm? So we have a lot of issues bound up together, all of them extremely vital, but the focus, as Grazia said, is on global innovation, and it's on looking at particularly how disruptive change affects global innovation in terms of global strategy and the ability of firms to cope with this very, very difficult external environment that they face with. 5 minutes is impossible on this, but there we go.
Thank you, Peter. Mario, over to you.
Good, thank you, Grazia. Hi, everyone. Following the comments of Peter, I'm focusing much more on innovation and technology. And if we think about it more broadly, and especially in the era we are living, there is something happening in technology and innovation that has never happened before. And that is that we've got at least 5 platform technologies evolving simultaneously, evolving at the same time, including AI, including robotics, including blockchain technology and energy technologies and multi-omics. If we go back nearly 100 years ago, we'll have to say back then 2 or 3 platform technologies involving at the same time. Now we have 5, at least 5, plus we have a lot of progress made in quantum computing, so we might see a sixth one. And these are platform technologies. These are not just separate technologies. These are platform technologies that create very unique ecosystems for many other technologies, other products, other systems and services to build upon and create entirely new things. So there is a huge opportunity there. In addition, we have also observed what is going on in the last 20 years or so. So despite several economic crises, wars, a pandemic, all these geopolitical tensions, R&D spending has nearly tripled. Yeah, and on top of that, we've seen commitment from the US, Europe, China to spend an additional nearly $1 trillion on new technologies and AI. So I see this as a huge opportunity for us as IB scholars and global strategy scholars. There are so many interesting questions and themes that one can explore, but to keep it simple and stay within my 5-minute time slot, I'm going to focus on 3 key themes and overarching questions. So the first one concerns the question of, okay, we've got AI and blockchain technologies and all these disruptive technologies. Who's going to be the winner and who's going to be the loser? So put differently, as an overarching question, one might see this as which firms or industries or even countries that increasingly play an important role, as we have seen recently, will effectively leverage these disruptive technologies and which will struggle. So put differently, under this theme, yes, we know that overall these technologies might be beneficial, but not all organizations, not all countries, and so on, will be able, or at least equally able, to use these technologies effectively. And therefore, the question becomes, if, yeah, we all benefit, who is going to benefit much more than the others, and how will this change competitive advantages and, of course, the redistribution of economic rents? Yeah, if one gains much stronger competitive advantage than the other, that will lead to eventually a redistribution of economic rents. We know very little about, what kind of characteristics will determine the ability of firms or countries to leverage those disruptive technologies. There are also at the country level very interesting stuff going on. So I was reading, for instance, I was writing a proposal. I had to go through statistics about R&D spending in different countries. I live in the UK, and I was comparing the UK with the US and other countries. I was quite surprised with this kind of differences. So, for instance, the US is spending nearly 170 billion US dollars on new AI technologies, whereas the corresponding figure for the UK was just 35 billion. So again, there are significant variations that as IB and global strategy scholars we can exploit. So that's the first theme. The second theme I would suggest as very important is the impact of such disruptive technologies on global innovation strategy. So put differently, we know very little about how these disruptive technologies will reshape M&E's innovation strategy. And this might include different things. So how will it change their R&D internationalization strategy, or the R&D configuration, or their location choices? How will this change how they identify and source knowledge from abroad? There are also important issues around the collaboration practices and how will they establish, for instance, alliances. We know that now they will need very different inputs, skills, capabilities. So how will that change their approach to collaboration? It also concerns the output. So if we look at it from the point of view of what kind of products and services they offer, we can see very new patterns being established. So it's only rarely in these days that we're talking about different products. We have the rise of platform-based ecosystems. So rather than offering standalone products, we see very big companies building those huge platform systems that encapsulate a lot. So again, very interesting questions there. And finally, what I would also suggest as a key theme is how these disruptive technologies will change value creation and value capture, value appropriation. Obviously, they are going to redefine how firms create and capture value. I can also see this as a huge challenge. So we know that many of these technologies are beneficial to other firms and to us as consumers. But even though many of these technologies offer immense potential, they lack a clear business model for generating economic rents. So yeah, we can say they are beneficial, but that differs a lot from finding a business model that will generate that stream of revenue and economic rents. We can also see that certain inputs are very different now. So for instance, data, it becomes much more important as a key asset, and it's very few large multinational firms, including companies like Google, Meta, Microsoft, that have got access to all these huge data sets. So we might see very different data-driven strategies for creating and capturing value. But that will be also, considering it from the point of view of who appropriates what. And we have seen, for instance, certain companies, much smaller companies from China, being able to build on this very quickly. So again, is this going to be a one takes it all approach, or will have multiple players appropriating value? In my view, very, very interesting questions that we all need to address. I'm going to stop here so that I don't spend too much time on this. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mario. So we might move from a more theoretical context approach to the more focused technological take from Mario. And then we move to hear from Marianna what will be her take on the call.
So Grazia, I will link to what Mario just said about the critical role of data from the point of view multinational and platform to the critical role of data for scholars who want to submit to this special issue. I see a key challenge that this special issue poses, and as any challenge, it also offers a great opportunity. Because to address many of these questions that we have mentioned so far, I think scholars will inevitably need to look for some kind of source of data that is different from what we have for a long time relied on when we worked at the intersection between IB and innovation. In a way, this special issue, I believe, poses an interesting challenge, and so we hope to receive interesting contribution in this respect to evaluate the effect of these disruptive changes, including the technologies that Mario has just mentioned. So new data are necessary to address this question. It can be proprietary data, for example, or primary data collected, but something that allows you to shed light on the effect of this new technology, like AI, is not the only one that we mention in the call for paper, but is inevitably the one most advocated. And there is very little out there on this. So I'm very curious to see what scholar will come up with to investigate this disruptive change in terms of their empirical approach and data they will rely on. Considering, of course, that for GSJ, it is extremely important that a good empirical base will match an excellent theoretical framework. So the two are inevitably the two sides of the same coin. And going back to to the call and to these two aspects of disruptive change that we aim to investigate, I see a very interesting trade-off in this tendency determined by technological sovereignty or new new techno-nationalism, as we want to call it. So this tendency of countries and government to protect their boundaries and protect the access to their technology. And on the other side, the awareness that they must be strongly embedded in international networks of collaboration, as Mario and Peter mentioned. And so this increasing role of markets for technology that is there, it's not diminishing, actually it's the opposite, like the R&D spending is tripling over the last decade or so, even the markets for technology, so a number of patents and patents that are the result of the collaboration across countries and across organizations is increasingly important. So these geopolitical change, they will affect the market for technology, what kind of effect they will have. We hope to receive contribution in this respect that shed further lights on this interesting aspect. And again, I want to stress that hopefully this interesting contribution will also rely on some new data set, on some very advanced empirical strategy that will give you the opportunity to address one of these questions in a very interesting and original way. And with that, I will stop, Grazia, and leave the floor to the next colleague.
Thank you, Marianna. So the perspective of Marianna is this interesting opportunity to exploit new data and methods. And let's now hear from Srividya. Just a note before I leave the floor to Srividya. Srividya and myself are the part of the team that represent the journal, so we will act as supervising editor for this special issue. So Srividya, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Grazia. I think of this call as at a super interesting intersection of technology and geopolitics. I will follow pretty much along the lines of the colleagues who have spoken earlier. I think innovation and geopolitics are really at the intersection. And my kind of focus or take on this call is really looking at innovation as the battlefield of geopolitics. Thinking about what are the implications for corporate innovation? When will corporate innovation increase, and under what conditions will corporate innovation decrease? If you think about examples like Huawei or DeepSeek, we're actually seeing an increase in some sense, even though there are headwinds, geopolitical headwinds. And so kind of thinking about what are some of the challenges to innovation that we know from longstanding research on global strategy, but also putting in the layer of thinking about how geopolitics really is at creating these incentives and implications for when corporate innovation increases and when it decreases. I want to focus specifically on thinking about what is so unique about geopolitics for innovation. And I want to highlight two things. One is thinking about national security. When does national security play into innovation? How do national security concerns impact global companies thinking about global strategy? And also highlighting a few issues related to national security, which include things like military or dual use innovations, thinking about how AI and technology are related to these sectors of innovation beyond what we know more generally. And then the second part, thinking about innovation and geopolitics, is thinking about economic competition. How does geopolitics impact or shape economic competition between and across companies in terms of their innovation outcomes and driving innovation? Other colleagues have already spoken about techno-nationalism in general, the idea of keeping innovations at home. I want to also highlight specific policies that we are seeing a lot these days. Two that I will highlight. One is investment screening, and the second is export restrictions. So thinking about how policies like these that have a potential to shape and impact the technological development, the trajectory of technological development, as well as how companies can navigate around these kinds of policies. And then related to that, I also want to highlight a very critical challenge that global firms face, which is being thought of disentangling this, belonging to a particular country. So our firms versus their firms. So who counts as who counts as a firm from a country, right? So a domestic firm versus a foreign firm, or firm belonging to one country versus firm belonging to other countries, and what type of market and non-market strategies exist for firms to shape this perception of their belonging to a particular country. And then the final point I want to make relates to thinking about how specifically does geopolitical tensions shape innovation, shape the evolution of technological development. There are different types of issues. For example, it may be about decoupling. It may be about limiting international exchange, whether this is people, technologies, or corporations. And then issues about reinventing the wheel. So is it simply by keeping technological trajectories separate and different, then are more companies just having to reinvent the wheel and doing the same thing in different parts of the world? And the last point I want to highlight is thinking about competing standards. If you have Peter already talked about this in the beginning when he talked about the different spheres or different the West broadly and China and allies broadly. If we end up with different types of technological standards, how do multinational corporations actually navigate these different technological standards, and what does that mean for innovation? So broadly, those are the types of issues and concerns. I think there's a lot of potential, again, for development of theory, for strong empirical approaches, as well as really focusing on specific phenomena that might give us an insight into how this evolution is happening. So thank you, and I'll pass it on to the other colleagues.
Thank you, Vidya. So the two disruptive changes that we are looking at are the technological and the geopolitical one. I can see there are different take on this from the different guest editor. We now pass over to Minyuan to hear about her take on the call. Please, Minyuan.
Okay, I thought Shasha is before me, but that's okay. I think the main areas already covered by the previous speakers. I just want to mention one particular factor that you can consider being the outcome of those disruptive changes, or it can be a mediating effect, which is organizational forms. So when you Srividya, you mentioned the DeepSeek, you mentioned Huawei, and DeepSeek is literally like a bunch of hedge fund guys, right? Using an open source platform, building on it, and came up with something disruptive to the dominance of OpenAI, the closed form competitor. And so I know in UK, you now have the NERJA too, right? For the whole last week, my friends like, who, what is that? And it was basically a medical school graduate who didn't want to be a doctor, and building on a collaboration of 138 studios, animation studios in China, and came up with now box 5, I think number 5 in global box office animation film. So Huawei again, is participating in the autonomous driving, not as a car company, but as a complement to all the existing businesses. So I think all the platforms, Maria mentioned the importance of platforms. Another example I can think of in the auto industry is a platform like Avanci. Right, it's for those of us who study IP litigation, you've never seen so many companies willing to pay a license fee without a fight. And here we have a licensing platform, basically bringing all the automakers together, all the automakers outside of China. So we see a lot of disruptive organizational forms partly as a result of disruptive changes, partly as a result of geopolitical tension. And their outcome, but they also play a very important role shaping how innovation is going. And we're seeing a lot of disruptive players into the market. All those who are, what are the names? Why are they number one now? Why are they number two now? Partly because of the innovative organizational structure they're adopting. So I think, that's one angle to look at the phenomenon.
Thank you, Minyuan. Last but not least, Shasha.
Thank you. So yes, I would very much agree with what the other guest editors have put forward so far. Maybe just to add, similar to Minyuan, I'll just add maybe a few points. Or highlight a few points. One is, I think, even though the special issue is about the intertwined relationship between innovation and geopolitics, but I think from my own perspective, I'd quite like to see how that has a broader impact and what are the role of the broader communities and stakeholders who play in this nexus. So stakeholders, impact on stakeholders, for example, impact on different parts of the world, as in, yes, we're talking about maybe, the tech tension between China and the US, but what implication that has on companies, but also from a, economic perspective on the peripheral countries. And within those peripheral countries, what implications innovations from foreign corporations have in those countries in terms of disruptive innovations. That I think for me is personally very interesting. Another thing I think is important to maybe look at is that even though, we're talking about this major technological changes and geopolitics, which are very, micro level phenomenon that we tend to discuss. But I think the real impact is really at the micro foundations level. And we really need to for me personally, I like really to look at the real changes that takes place within, one or two or few organizations, how disruptive innovation really takes place, and what are the impact, for example, what impact it has on knowledge management, or how knowledge management impacts on the development of disruptive technologies, or the application of technologies, etc. And as Mario actually mentioned earlier, that there's different types of technologies. There's not just different types of technologies within these different types. There are specific technologies that function in their own distinct ways. So even though we broad brush term them the technologies, but each types of technologies would have different role to play and different effect. So studies around these specific areas would be quite interesting from my own perspective. And I'll hand it back to Grazia.
Thank you, Shasha. So focus on stakeholder and individual from Shasha perspective. So for those that have just joined, we have quite some people that have joined lately. And we have just ended the round of take of the guest editor on the special issue call. So now I call the help of the SMS office to organize the breakout room. So each of the participants has the opportunity to join one breakout room that will be led by a specific editor based on what you have heard and how you think your paper may resonate more with one perspective on the special issue rather than the other. So it's an opportunity to pitch your idea, to have a conversation with the guest editor that you think may be more appropriate to deal with your potential submission to the special issue. So the room have just opened up. So if you can please assign yourself to one of the different rooms, we will be back in plenum in about 15 minutes. So welcome back. I hope you had a productive discussion. So the time is left is for more general question about a special issue. It's up to you if you want to use the chat to ask question or if you want to just raise your hand and ask your question orally. Anyone who wants to break the ice or everything is clear and you're ready to submit for September 30? Okay, so let me give you a brief overview of the review process. When the manuscript will be submitted, there will be a first screening that I and Srividya, as a representative of the journal, will do. So make sure that your contribution will fall within the domain of Global Strategy Journal, which I am, as mentioned, is interesting in the intersection between the global context and global strategy. And also make sure that the paper is enough developed, so don't be us the first reader of your paper. If you have a chance, get a friendly review or present at conferences so that you have also an opportunity to help having have an opportunity to submit a more quality paper that has a greater chances to survive the review process. So the screening, as I mentioned, will be for the domain, for fit, and eventually for quality. But we are hopeful that with these many sessions we are having, we will hopefully get a good quality paper, and it is clear what the domain of the journal is, so that is not a paper that targets a more generic strategy journal or a more generic IB journal. Again, Global Strategy Journal, if you like, is a niche journal with this clear focus on the interaction between the global context and company strategies. So I don't know whether this may raise any question you might have about fit or quality or any other aspect of the review process that we can help answer. I don't know whether the other guest editor would like to add anything to whatever has been covered, so something that can help prospective author in submitting their contribution.
Grazie. It's probably worth from me clarify one aspect because I received a question in the breakout room. So when I say the new data, I don't mean to reinvent the wheel, but I was thinking specifically about what we often discuss in terms of investigating the effect of blockchain on multinational reconfiguration or the effect of artificial intelligence. So at that point, I expect some kind of original data in the sense that there is not much around available on to measure the use of blockchain or to measure specifically, more importantly, definitely the use of artificial intelligence in organizational context. That's what I meant, okay? So rather than totally new data, I would say some new source of data, probably. Hope that makes sense.
So an opportunity to be original on the methodological side and matching this originality method with originality in theory. That's, I believe, is the take of Marianna. Oh, there is a question. The timeline for the special issue from Deepak. Deepak, what is that you have in mind in terms of timeline?
Basically, the review process as well as when we can expect this SI to be, published eventually. So that is what I was looking at more.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. I mean, the review process will be the standard timeline that we have for the journal. So typically, you can expect the first round of review back within the 3 months. GSJ has a good record on this. We want to keep this standing also in the special issue. Of course, things can happen to author as well as reviewer, and we can be accommodating. And ideally, we would like to have to go through 2 major rounds of revision. And of course, there might be some further requests for fine-tuning and so on. See, this is why, in order to be able to make within this time frame, what I will suggest is to present your work to get friendly reviewer, so to submit a paper that has higher chances to make within the time frame and can survive the quality check. I hope I answer your question. Yeah. Okay, I thought there was no. Okay, I thought there was another question on the chat. No. Any other? Yes, sure. Shanita.
Yes, when you talk about friendly review, what does you mean by that friendly review?
Asking a colleague or a supervisor to give a read to your paper before submitting. So getting comment on the version you plan to submit, to avoid that the editor and the reviewer will be the first scholar reading your paper. Right? So by getting this comment, you have an opportunity to work further on the paper to fine-tuning and improve it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. Okay, so can I ask the editor if you have anything else that you would like to add? No? Okay. I would like to thank you all the participants. We ran 5 minutes late. Sorry about that. We had some technological difficulty that hopefully were solved. And thank you for participating. Please do reach out to the guest editorial team if you have any question before the submission deadline, which is September 30, 2025. Please do join us to the session that we have scheduled in the upcoming months in order to get more insight, and maybe again you have more mature thought on about your work, and you'll be in a different position to interact with the guest editor. So on that note, thank you very much, and we look forward to receive your submission.